We had a very busy weekend in Seawolves sports, and uh, one big win and one not such, not so hurtful loss, I guess is the best way you can describe it. Let's start with the women's lacrosse team and their victory over the University of Florida. Happened early in the morning. It was a 10 o'clock start. And then soon after that, the men got down to business against number 4 Rutgers, and they fought tooth and nail, kind of like the women did against Syracuse, but did not come up with the win. But let's start with the women.
Yeah, the women coming up with a big win, Matt, as you said. It's number 5 Stony Brook taking on number 11 ranked Florida. This is a weaker Florida team, both entering and after reflecting on the contest than in previous years. But Florida's the team that's given this women's program a lot of trouble. I think, in terms of, obviously you have the UNCs and Boston Colleges and Syracuse, but I think Florida has been the most persistent thorn in Stony Brook women's lacrosse side, especially since Joe Splina is taking charge of the program. They entered Saturday morning 1-7 all time against Florida. And that one win was also a 1-goal victory, 12-11 at Florida back in 2015. But this game started off completely different than any other match. Stony Brook scored 8 of the game's first 10 goals, and they had a lot of insurance for a lot of the game because when Florida keeps storming back, Stony Brook still had a couple goals in their pockets from the first half of action. And they really did a lot of great job attacking the left side of the cage, getting the shots past Sarah Resnick, who's a tremendous goalie, one of the best in the nation. But they dominated that first half, and that was a huge break for them when the Gators climbed back in the second, Matt.
Well, you knew the comeback was coming, and that is now, of course, when you look at the team statistics, and the first thing that jumps out at me is turnovers again, and I'll bet you, without even looking at the stat broadcast, the box score, if you go by quarter, actually, we'll do that. See what we can get in the quarter because, yep, as expected. 10 turnovers in the second half versus 6 in the first. And that, I think, gave Florida the opportunity, or Florida forcing those turnovers, gave them the opportunity to come back.
Yeah, exactly. Florida obviously being down, they were a lot tighter that second half defensively. Obviously, the press was there using that trap zone defense, and it worked in the second half. Whereas in the first, Stony Brook was really good because they blew by the defense, broke the defense. Really, they got a lot of goals in transition. A lot of goals like Rafferty finding Sapolsky just in the transition, or vice versa, getting goals early to start the game. As I said, it was big for the Seawolves to get out to such a big lead by halftime. They were already up, 8-4. They're up 8-2, 20 minutes in the contest, 25 minutes in the contest. So, their offense was ready to go, and a lot of players stepped up for them on the attack. As I said, Kyla Sapolsky, she finished with a goal. As well as Ellie Macera and Kaylin Hart, that duo having another tremendous outing. Both of them had 4 goals, and they were a big reason for the team's success, including knocking down all 4 combined of the free position opportunities they had. That was big for Stony Brook, making all 5 of their free position chances.
Yeah, when you get it's a charity stripe. It is a free throw in basketball, and when you get the opportunities, you have to make them. And yes, obviously, it's a test of the goalie when you go 1-on-1. But the Seawolves have actually been pretty good so far this year on those. And you foul them at your peril is basically the best way to express it.
Yeah, exactly. And as he says, this charity stripe. It's really the only time in these contests where you're able to actually, get a one-on-one opportunity.
But here's something very interesting. Okay, you mentioned draw controls, right? I'm looking at, again, the quarter-by-quarter breakdown. What happened here? Florida owned the draw controls in the third quarter, and Seawolves took 5 of the last 6 in the fourth. Again, probably saved the game for them. But what happened where Florida started taking them over? I mean, again, not having watched the game because we're too busy preparing for the men's game, which we aired, I don't know if there were violations called or things like that, but it's rare, unless you switch your draw control specialist, that one side dominates do one stretch of the game and then goes the other way all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think for Florida, they were really mixing it up. And, just especially looking at third quarter, you had uh, Bella Palagonia getting draw control, and they were winning. Let's see, also Sheldon Sawers, the two of them really, were in control of the draw control battles. And they were just, I think, pressing a lot harder, fighting for it, having that extra gear on fighting for those draw controls. Well, Stony Brook was okay because of how big the lead was, giving it up just to make sure their defense was set. And that was one of the things where, especially towards the later half of that third quarter, it got Florida back in it, where the game went from 11-8 to a tie game. Was Florida winning those draw control battles and Stony Brook committing fouls, which ultimately led to goals.
Well, I mean, looking at the individual draw control statistics, Liz Harrison on Florida had 8, led everybody. And also, Ellie Macera had 7 for the Seawolves. That led everybody. Claire Levy was 1-1. Charlotte Verhulst, who took most of the draw controls on the Syracuse game in particular, only had 1.
Yeah, it wasn't her best outing, but for just going back to Ellie Macera, it was big for her. I think, especially getting those draw controls, because just utilizing her speed immediately off the jump, and I think that's why we saw Coach Spallina and the team go to Ellie Macera, Claire Levy, Evan McQuarrie. Those are 3 of the fastest players on that squad. So if you're able to get ahead of the Florida defense, before they're able to actually set or try to trap the opponents, they're able to convert opportunities into goals because you're ahead in the transition. That's something that helped Stony Brook jump out to such a big lead, was the fact that they were going ahead in transition and just moving the ball ahead of the defense, Matt.
Well, also taking a look at the day that Ellie Macera had overall was, the 4 goals and assists, 5-point game. And that also led everybody. Danielle Pavanelli for Florida matched that with 4 goals and an assist. But again, big days by and Kaylin Hart as well. Now, Kaylin Hart usually hangs out at the right wing, and obviously found some. First of all, on 5 shots, no less. I mean, talk about efficiency. Macera and Hart 4 goals on 5 shots. So again, a very good performance there. But what does this do in terms of the poll? I think Stony Brook definitely holds its position. And Florida, I mean, they may not go down too far either because, they did what the Stony Brook men did yesterday, held their own against a team ranked higher than them.
I think just because they've already been going down, they're probably going to go down, a bit more. I don't think this knocks them out, obviously, the top 20, but they may, lose a couple spots because of that. And you're right, with Stony Brook, it's tough to see. I don't know if they'll be able to jump anyone just because the teams ahead of them, Boston, UNC, Syracuse, Maryland, they all won. Just make sure I got this right. They all won their contests as well. So, it's Stony Brook still, again, a commendable top 5 team, and it gets them really. The big thing is that they get a signature win, because we spoke with Joe Spallina, Anthony Leon to be exact, or Anthony Leon spoke with Joe Spallina after last week's routing against Dartmouth, and they said, "Hey, we need to win these games at Northwestern, but primarily Florida, just to get that first signature win under their belt." So now the team has that, and that's something they could build off of as they look forward to facing another highly ranked team in Northwestern.
That's right. That is in Evanston. We're going to bring that game to you as best we can. That's Thursday, March 10th. Night game, no less. And the funny thing is, even though Laval Stadium is equipped with lights, I'm looking here, and for the most part, the lacrosse teams generally do not play at night. There are exceptions, but at Princeton is a night game as well. At Hofstra is at Truett Stadium, a night game. But home games, however, Joe Spallina is not necessarily that big on playing those at night. For the most part, there are exceptions. Like I said, Saturday, April 23rd, will be home against UMBC. That's a 6 p.m. start. But by that point, 6 p.m. will be daylight, and the sun will be setting probably, somewhere around the late third quarter. So, again, the Seawolves not making use necessarily of the night facilities. Now, of course, early in the season, you want to play at night either. But on the flip side, teams have been doing it.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting too, as you said, just that. Also, this Northwestern team, which is pretty legit, they're right under Stony Brook in the national rankings. Here, looking at the Inside Lacrosse poll, ranked sixth behind Stony Brook's fifth, and they have a few more games on hand over the Seawolves. Seawolves are going to enter at 2-1, Northwestern 4-1, and they've been rolling. Had a big win this weekend as well, and got some top tier players, similarly to Stony Brook. They got some obviously a great attack, a good midfield, defensively able to hold their own. Obviously in net, just a good all around team. And having players like Lauren Gilbert at the attack, has 31 points, or had 31 points last year, I believe. And Brennan Dwyer as well in the midfield, 12 goals, 14 points. It's a legit team. This isn't going to be a walk in the park for either squad.
Well, and also it's a gauntlet for the Seawolves too, because they had Florida, who they barely got by, as we said. Florida had a big comeback in the second half. Number 6 Northwestern, according to the current poll, of course, the new poll comes out tomorrow, and number 20 Johns Hopkins that Sunday. Okay, so you got 3 days to go from one ranked team to the next, and you also come back home. You also have to travel back from the Midwest. So you'll be flying home from Chicago. And then you got Hofstra, and that of course you have a full week. But the most important thing here, this is because of the lack of an American East tournament, lack of an automatic qualifier, probably the most important part of the schedule, and a way to answer the people who always say, well, Stony Brook doesn't play anybody. Right. Well, guess what? If they win all 3, and that's not out of reach by any stretch of the imagination, because I think they played their toughest game yesterday. Could be wrong.
I think this one's going to be tougher. Again, they're going up against, they got this Northwestern team. They have games on hand, but already, as I said, player like Lauren Gilbert, who has 26 goals this season, in her 5 games played, and Aaron Coy Kendall as well as 21 points. They got a really good attack, and even though the team can use a bit more variety in the scoring with their 3, main scorers. The offense just flows like nothing. And obviously, Northwestern has a couple of goaltenders they could turn to, but for the most part, it's been Madison Duchette who's been net minding for the squad, and she's done a fair job. 4-2 on the season so far, and save percentage of around 35%.
Okay, so the women have leg 1 of this 3-game gauntlet against ranked teams is success. And like I said, probably the most important part of the schedule, they do have another ranked team on the schedule, at least one that's currently ranked, I should say. Who knows? Other schools may move up over time. But 10th ranked Princeton is on the agenda for Tuesday, March 29th. That is a 7 p.m. start down there. And you know what? That's not out of range of us possibly doing as well. But we'll get into that. WUSB.FM/sports is always the place to go. Needs a little bit of updating because we'll get into it with baseball because they keep changing that time of that Tuesday afternoon game that's coming up. But we shall segue to the men now. And, oh boy, 4th-ranked team in the nation, and a team that had, first of all, it plays in the Big Ten, so half the conference is ranked already. But this was going to be the first major test, I think, for the men, and the men, well, they came close to passing it. They only had 1 lead the entire game. They played either tied or behind. But the great thing about it was that they held serve. They went toe-to-toe with the 4th-ranked team in the country, lost by a goal. Game was still winnable. And, Rutgers went up as much as 5, and the Seawolves ate up that lead too. So they didn't quit. They cut 5-goal deficit to 1 with 4:58 to play. I mean, you like your chances there.
Yeah,
but
it's an admirable performance on that part for sure.
Yeah, awesome performance.
It's definitely something to me where it just feels like, they left it on the table, so to speak, to where, they're fighting back and you're thinking, all right, this is going to be a time where they take it and hold on to it, and it just never comes to fruition. And part of that's because of just how dominant Rutgers is overall, especially the attack. You saw yesterday, Matt.
Yeah.
Just their offense is incredible. One of the best in the nation, legit, men or women's. And obviously, it's tough for a Stony Brook team with how good they've been so far this season to keep up with that. But at the same time as well, it feels like they would start to get on a roll and then do something where they leave the door open for Rutgers. And Rutgers, it's a game of runs, Matt. And Rutgers was just piling it on, and they were getting their runs in.
But funny thing is, the game ended on a 4-0 Stony Brook run.
Right.
Rutgers scored their last goal with 9:54 left in the fourth. That gave them a 17-12 lead, and the Seawolves then rattled off the 7:15, 6:28, 5:42, 4:58 for their 4 goals, and Rutgers just basically held on for the last 4 minutes and hung on for dear life. Last 5 minutes. So again, down a goal with plenty of time. This game was winnable. And what it does is, like I've often said with close games like this in every sport Stony Brook plays in, it leaves you wanting more. So, you know what? Mm-hmm. Losing by a goal, looking back, we'll probably say, okay, it was a loss, but it wasn't a bad loss. But on the other hand, the game was winnable. Yeah. But Rutgers did manage to come up with, and this was the most important thing here, look at the team stats and then look at the turnovers. Mm-hmm. The turnovers were the killer for the Seawolves. And like I said, similar to now the women's turnovers against Syracuse weren't absurdly high over the course of the game, but they were timely. And Syracuse was able to hang on by doing much the same thing, coming up with stops and taking the ball away. Because, again, you look at the turnovers, and you see 8 turnovers in the first half, only 6, but 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter, and 14-6 overall. Rutgers hardly ever turned the ball over.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the Seawolves had the edge on faceoffs, big-time edge, especially in the fourth quarter.
If you're looking at, guys who stepped up, it really, to me, was the special team guys in the sense of Renz Conlon and Anthony Palma. I know Palma gave up 17 goals, but it was a heck of a job, I think, holding Rutgers do that.
16 saves.
Exactly.
Rutgers was like a machine gun.
Yeah, and Colin Kurtz, who's a great local talent as well, New York talent, he only had 12 saves and allowed 16 goals. So,
9 in the second half.
Yeah, he had a great second half. But just going back to Renz Conlon, I think really he was the star of yesterday because to me he kept Stony Brook in, which is how hard he fought for face-off wins, how hard he fought at the X, and also even when he was losing it, he was still ramming through the opponents, forcing turnovers.
Right, and just to give you an idea of what happened, okay, Rutgers actually had the edge in the second quarter in face-offs. They took 5 of 9. But then in the third, the Seawolves took 6 of 7 and then 8 of 10. So add them up, 14 of 17 in the second quarter alone. Total dominance. And that was the reason they got back in the game, really, because Rutgers wasn't coughing it up. They weren't able to force turnovers, but they were able to get the ball when they needed it. And they, of course, they turned the ball over a bit too much. Just a little bit of tweaking here and there. And I think they're gonna get votes, definitely, for the poll. Yeah. I don't know if losing a game will allow them to break in because they don't have the established reputation of, say, a Loyola, who would lose their first 3 games and still stay high up there, including one to Rutgers. And they're not that. They're not part of the Maryland Big Five. So, and of course, they're playing in the America East. They don't play anybody. America East men is a much stronger conference than America East women, and is still going to be quite a task because when you look at their schedule, and that's the thing that I find very interesting because the America East is not getting much love as far as the polls are concerned. Nobody's ranked.
I would say with the Ivy Leagues, that was definitely, I think, the biggest difference is, with the Ivy Leagues coming back, they've taken the spots and they've pushed, other teams who were ranked higher last year down and knocked out, I think, every team in the America East because of that. So you remember at one point last year, there were 4 America East teams ranked and there were no Ivies playing. And, here it's flipped around where, I think, I don't know if every Ivy team is in, but almost every Ivy team is ranked. And, it's only a couple of America East teams receiving votes.
I'm just pulling up last week's poll. Of course, as I said, next week's comes up to tomorrow. But just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with here. Now, of course, I'm also looking at the Stony Brook schedule. Just a second. I think Google is having a little bit of trouble. It's hanging up a little bit. Because Inside Lacrosse is not coming up. So, as I was saying, now, as far as Rutgers is concerned, as I said, they run the gauntlet. Now, according to this, looking for, that's preseason, week 3, come on. And then I get an ad.
Well, Rutgers
frustrating.
They're 4 and 5 in national polls this week.
Yes. And, okay, Maryland's still this week, Maryland's still number 1. I'm looking for upcoming ranked teams. And, again, America's getting no love. Syracuse is ranked 14th. We play them at home. They went down from 9 last week.
Right.
And, you know.
That's on March 19th. Brown, I don't think they're ranked, but that's who's coming up next for Stony Brook.
Yes.
Saturday.
And Brown is not ranked. So, and again, receiving votes, Brown did receive votes along with Stony Brook. So they're kind of on the same level right now, just trying to break in.
Right.
But
that's really
no American East love at all.
Exactly, yeah.
I just had to check that out to make sure that wasn't off, but it's true. What's also interesting, too, is that I think expectations have been pretty high. I mean, Vermont has been chosen to finish first, has been in the preseason poll. But I thought that all the teams were going to improve a little bit. But you're right. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the Ivies have revived their programs and are back in among the powers here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just going back to yesterday's game too, it was interesting because it was a loss, obviously, and they really could improve on every facet. Obviously, defense, giving up so many goals. I know it's hard, especially on trying to slide against some of the best attackers and middies in the game today. But on the offense, Palinetti and McCannell, they really took control, especially in that fourth quarter. They're the only two guys who finished with 10 plus shots and 5 plus points for Stony Brook.
And that's another one. The scoring, well, there's one very important reason why the scoring was probably not as evenly distributed as it's been in the past. And that was the fact that that Coach Gilardi ran the top line out for more minutes than he normally does.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so your usual suspects of Wayne White, Matt Anderson, and Mike McCannell. McCannell had 5 goals, okay, on 10 shots. First of all, McCannell rarely takes that many shots, and Palinetti took most of his shots in the second half when he needed to. Right. So, I mean, Palinetti, a couple of weeks ago, Greg and I were talking about him probably taking too many shots, but when push came to shove in the fourth quarter, he was there, and he was creating opportunities, and he was carrying the team on his back. So, it's great to have somebody like that. But right. McCannell had some good ones, too. But Palinetti didn't get any assists, but he usually does get at least 1 or 2. But the important thing here is that's one of the reasons why you didn't see the occasional, like Mike McMahon picking one up, or Matt DeMeo off the bench, or somebody like that. You don't see much of that. You don't even see a Christian Loud trying one. He did get one shot off with a long stick, but it was a short bounce that went like 10 feet over the crossbar.
He had a good game. He had a good game, though. And I think with this contest,
pretty much, yeah. 4 ground balls.
Yeah, and I think just pressing overall and
a close turnover.
Yeah, especially with the talent he was going up against. But for the team, even with the loss, you get that benefit of, okay, this was the toughest challenge of the season so far. And if this is as hard as it gets, at least until the Syracuse game, if this is as hard as it gets, then, the other teams we're facing are in for some trouble. Because, again, you got a Brown team that's on the same level as Stony Brook. But Seawolves haven't had any problems in the past defeating them before, number one. And number two, they're coming off such a tough game. You know where your team needs to improve, and you've seen the growth of this team, especially on the backside since week 1 to where we are now. So,
well, funny thing too about Rutgers is that even though they went in overall in 12 meetings 6-6, Seawolves had won 5 of the last 6 meetings.
Yeah.
So, but Rutgers is a program. I mean, they are up and coming. They're like I said, they're ranked fourth. But they've definitely made some improvements over the past couple of years. So they're not the same team that
Absolutely.
Seawolves have been beaten up on in the past. But but last time they met, Seawolves won by a goal. So it's a nice rivalry. And hopefully we'll see them in the non-conference schedule in future years as well. I mean, like I said, we've already faced them 13 times. So, and of course, the little connection to Steve Peichel and his Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who we should talk about because championship week is coming up and they're making headlines. I mean, Steve Peichel was brought there from Stony Brook to turn the program around, and he's done it. Okay, they're getting mentions. They're considered a legit tournament threat. They're really looking good. But we'll get into that later. The important thing here, though, is that despite the fact that there is no playoff for any Stony Brook team, you got two programs that have an opportunity to possibly get in at large. I mean, the women, I think, have the best chance,
Right.
but don't rule out the men.
Now, to say a performance like this, I think, as you said, it keeps them in the back of the pollsters' mind, because if it was just a blown out loss, everyone would have, shrugged and moved along, and that's about the end of Stony Brook being on these lists the rest of the year. But the
If
fact
you're
that
in the
already
top 5 in the rankings and you're barred from the tournament, you should not be punished that way. You should get an at-large by virtue of the fact you're number 5 in the country.
Yeah, it's unprecedented. So we're gonna see what happens with that. But I'd assume it works the same way because as you said, the NCAA, it's different. It's not necessarily run the conferences themselves in the sense that the NCAA tournament, you could be. If you're ineligible for the conference tournament, you're not ineligible for the tournament as a whole. But as he says, it's going to take an at-large bid. For the women, especially with a win they got yesterday, they really shouldn't have a problem getting that at-large bid, as you said. But for the men, as long as they keep performing like this, especially with their attack, as long as they keep having explosive offensive performances, there's that strong chance they get an at-large bid. But it also, again, even though Stony Brook isn't really impacted by the American East, because, again, no conference tournament, they're not going to participate in it. The American East being competitive would help in that favor because it increases the likelihood that you get two teams from that conference. Because you're not just going to get, the automatic bid for the American East and then, maybe another squad if it's just Vermont steamrolling competition. It takes schools like UAlbany, UMBC, NGIT pulling off an upset or two as well.
Right. And yes, because then it's like Riddick Bowe was the guy who actually came up with the quote as a boxer. I'm the man who beat the man who beat the man who made that makes me the man.
Yep.
And that really does matter. If Albany beats, let's say, I have to look at Albany's schedule, so you look for the ranked team there. If they beat a ranked team and then Stony Brook beats Albany, they look good. Right. If Albany beats Syracuse...
Which is what happened last year, if you remember. Well, it was Syracuse, but, Albany beat a ranked team, and then the following game, Stony Brook beat Albany. And that was during that time where there were 3 to 4 American East teams getting receiving national votes.
So... just to give you an idea of what is going on in women's lacrosse in the conference that, I don't know, maybe we should stop mentioning them because, like I keep saying this over and over again, Stony Brook is a de facto independent and has to treat its schedule that way. They can't necessarily rely on the conference schedule to get them into the NCAA. But, okay, what happened on Saturday, New Hampshire beat Central Connecticut State 20-4, and Marist was beaten by Binghamton at home 15-6. Vermont got by Siena 13-10, and Hofstra beat Albany 11-7. Women play Albany later on in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
So again, that doesn't look so good. If Hofstra beats Albany and Stony Brook beats Hofstra, okay, Stony Brook's better.
We knew that from the last 8 years.
Exactly. So I'm just looking at big names that are coming up for women's lacrosse in conference, or amongst the conference members in their non-conference schedule is the best way to express it. Wednesday, March 9th, you got UMass Lowell and Wofford. Vermont takes on Marist, Towson, UMBC. That's always a good one. Canisius, Binghamton. Let's see. Columbia, New Hampshire, UMass Lowell, Quinnipiac, UMBC, Bucknell, Drexel, Albany, Binghamton, Pitt, Manhattan, Vermont. They don't play anybody either. That's a big problem because when Amy Huchthausen was commissioner of the America East, she was the one who really stressed this. Is that if we're going to get any respect from anybody, we have to play better non-conference schedules. But I'm looking at this overall women's lacrosse schedule, and you can follow it on AmericaEast.com if you have your phone or computer in front of you.
Yeah, I was going to say for women's lacrosse, it's definitely going to come down to name brand.
The only team that plays anybody, any big name school right now. I mean, yes, known schools. Albany doesn't play anybody. I'm looking at their schedule. They're not impressed with their non-conference schedule.
Well, I was going to say, for women's lacrosse, it's going to come down, obviously, to that name brand that this Stony Brook squad under Joe Spallina is legit. If they remain top 5 all year, that's what it's going to come down to in terms of earning
Albany played Yale, okay, and lost by 2.
Yeah, it's really for the men to where you're hoping that, the other programs the other schools in the conference, play competitive against better competition. So that way it looks better on the men if they have really good season. Yeah,
but it seems that, and again, this is definitely one of the reasons why when the books opened up and the CAA said we're taking new members, Stony Brook had to jump at it. And this was definitely, it was mentioned, again, I'll repeat the story, look it up in Inside Lacrosse, that changed my mind about the whole move, because I think you're going from one big conference to another. Look what happened to Hofstra. They got buried, blah, blah, blah. But the big problem that Stony Brook has historically had is not getting enough respect in the NCAA tournament seeding because they play in a weak conference, and a weak conference that doesn't seem to try to get any better, at least in women's lacrosse. It's like a lot of these schools treat women's lacrosse as, a way to comply with Title IX and don't pay a hell of a lot of attention to it. And Stony Brook doesn't do that. Stony Brook has a top coach, and they devote a lot of attention to it.
That's the face, I think, of Stony Brook athletics. Is just being honest, as good as men's program was in the past, it's been all women's lacrosse since 2012.
Absolutely. And 2012 is the last time the men got it in the NCAA.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, part of that had to do, it was like a Knicks Bulls thing with Michael Jordan. Okay. The Knicks were never going to get to the finals as long as the Bulls were in their way. And the 2 years when they weren't, 1 year they got there. So it's the same situation. With when you have good teams in your way, you're going to have problems.
Yeah,
and that's what happened with Albany. That's what happened with the Thompsons. And for a while there, I mean, for the first couple of years, Stony Brook could hold serve against them, but they get to the final and Albany stomps on them again. And that was the case throughout the early teens. Up until the Thompsons graduated. Remember, 2 of them shared a Tewaaraton.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. I think Stony Brook has gotten the shaft in terms of Tewaaraton. Okay, there are at least 2 women's lacrosse players that we know of, maybe 3, maybe 4, that should have won a Tewaaraton.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a tough team to get on the list.
Both Bull Millers, Courtney Murphy, and Allie Kennedy.
Yeah. Yeah, and just going back to the men, again, they're going to face Brown, and that's one of those games where you want them to win because that's going to help, their stock at the end of the season. This Brown team coming off a 22-10 win against Providence. They shot 51 shots in yesterday's contest against Providence. And again, winning 22-10, their offense is on a roll right now, and that's something they want to bring in. So this Brown team's been pretty good as well. 4-1 like Stony Brook. Their only loss to UNC. Even then, they only lost by 3. So, this is a Brown team. 2 teams we're looking at now trying to get in the top 20 polls, and a win a convincing win against the other could sneak them in, the bottom of the rankings.
I'm looking at well, first of all, when Stony Brook went to Brown to play Cornell in the NCAA back in 2002, they used Brown's football field. And I do believe they now have yes, they do, a specialized soccer lacrosse field. They don't use the stadium anymore. So, I mean, it's like Fallon Field at Albany. Now, Albany, interestingly enough, they play their regular season games at Fallon Field, but they move the tournament, if they host, to Bob Ford Field, which is their football stadium, which kind of reminds you of Laval in a lot of ways, as it should, because virtually everything in Albany is a carbon copy of Stony Brook and vice versa. The Albany's basketball facility is the same way, but they move it to the football field. In other words, they uproot their lacrosse program and put it in the big stadium for the big games instead of using a little bit of a home cooking that that the home field provides. I mean, I've done games up at Albany from Fallon Field and at Bob Ford Field, but I mean, obviously Bob Ford is the better facility, but there is something intimate about Fallon Field being a specialized lacrosse facility. So it's Stevenson Pinsence Field, or I probably mispronounced that, but it's named after longtime men's soccer and men's soccer lacrosse coach Cliff Stevenson, longtime women's soccer and softball coach Phil Pinsence, and is home to both teams. So that's where the game will take place. But
that's about it for the lacrosse talk. I was going to say it's going to be a fun game for sure. 2 fun games coming up this week. 3 actually, because 2 for the women's program. But yeah, it's proven time for both these squads.
Yeah, but again, they've already beaten Vermont by a goal, and they beat Villanova by a goal. And Quinnipiac was the only the only win that was decided by more than a goal, and they lost by 3 to North Carolina. So, they're about the same level we are, really.
No, yesterday's game they won by double digits, 22-10.
Okay. Oh, there we go, 22-10 against Providence. Okay, so yeah. Yeah,
it's an offense on a roll against a Stony Brook team where their offense could get on a roll.
Well, the other thing too, I think, is that the one part aspect of Stony Brook's game that has needed the most improvement, I think, over the course of these first few games, it has been the defense, and the defense has gotten better. Yeah,
Loud's been looking really good. I like Williams. He's pretty good as well. Those two, are 2 that's off the top of my head.
Well, Estrella on the short stick D midi has also been holding his own as well. So, look, this team is not going to be the type of game. Well, they will slow the game down and try to play at their tempo. I mean, the contrast, and Greg pointed out yesterday on the air, between Rutgers and Stony Brook was Rutgers, their offense worked best in transition, and the Stony Brook offense worked best in the equivalent of a half court. And you saw the difference. And again, Rutgers got what they needed to win, barely. Enough turnovers on Stony Brook's part to get a transition going.
Right, exactly. Also, never coughing up the lead helped.
Yeah.
Tremendously, not falling behind.